Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a Kickstarter preview for the Manhattan Project Energy Empire Cold War. This is the expansion for Energy Empire, one of our favorite worker placement games from, a couple years ago now?
Yeah.
And it adds a lot of different modules to the game for sure.
We invite you guys to go check out our review because we'll explain the entire game there. However, I know you guys are here because you want to know what is new and what they're adding to this particular game. And we're going to walk you through all the new components. And as we say with all of these Kickstarters, this is a prototype. You're seeing the original base game, but a lot of the new components are prototype. Make sure you guys go to the Kickstarter page to see all the final components. All right, so let's talk about what's new. The game comes with a new solo mode, which you'll talk about in a moment, plus a bunch of new modules that you're going to be interjecting into the game. The first thing that I'll talk about is you're going to have 7 new nations that you can actually use in the game. These, again, can be shuffled in with the other nations. These can be drafted or chosen by the players at will. All of these different nations are going to give you unique starting resources, just like the original game, and then also variable ways in which to increase your standing in the United Nations.
Yeah, another thing it comes with is new global impact cards. It doesn't have any for the early stage of the game, but for the later stage of the game where it's negative impact, there's a handful of new cards, some of which have some really unique effects. There's one that has everyone collecting all the resources and sort of doing a blind bid in the middle and potentially losing all those resources, but the winner gets 5 victory points. So that's going to be one of the things that's going to happen in the second half of the game. Another one of the new modules is just simply new structure cards. These are for all 3 of the different categories, and these do a variety of new things. Some things that'll seem somewhat familiar, but others that have a significant impact on the game. In fact, here's one, and there's one of these for each color that allows you to effectively take 2 turns on your turn. If you remember correctly, when you're playing this game, you're placing a worker out on the main board, and then it allows you to sort of fire off all of the cards that you've collected through the game. Well, if you do that and you use this card, you're then allowed to immediately place another worker back into that same colored area and take yet another action out there.
Continuing on with these structures, as you remember in the base game, you have 3 different markets that tie into the different colored structures. But now, instead of just your base structures, you have large structures. These are called megastructures.
Yeah.
And each of these megastructures is going to be dealt out randomly, so you're not always going to have one for each individual one. It's going to be equal to the number of players plus 1. And we happen to have 4 of them out because we have a 3-player game. These megastructures can also be acquired just like buildings. However, they have prerequisites on the bottom. This one, for instance, requires you to have 2 commerce buildings and then at least 2 stations on the United Nations, meaning you have to progress twice. They also have a payment, some kind of thing you have to pay in order to be able to collect this card. They're all worth a number of victory points at the end. They all give pollution just like the regular structure cards, and then they have some very, very powerful abilities that you'll be able to use through the course of the game.
Yeah, the ongoing abilities with those cards are really the key. These are one of the things that the original game didn't really have, and one of the things that as Euro players we're always looking for are those things that sort of let you break or bend the rules throughout the entire game. So the megastructures is definitely where it's at for that.
Speaking of one of the things that the original base game didn't have, and that was a lot of player interaction in the game. Now, each player is going to come to the table with one of these espionage cards that can work just like your United Nations cards, meaning that no matter where you go on the board, you can still utilize this ability. On the bottom of this card, it's going to show 1 worker and 1 energy. What this allows you to do is once you place your worker and energy on this, you can look around the table and see what buildings players haven't used of their own. You can then take any workers and energy they've left over and then use their buildings, which is really great because some people are going to be building some really cool engines in this game that you can't key off of, but now you kind of can.
Yeah, a lot of those cards that people collect are going to have things that duplicate a lot of the actions you take on the board, but oftentimes those are blocked. So if you can get their card and utilize it, you get 2 things. 1, you get the power. 2, you blocking it from them. So it's a pretty interesting addition to this game. It adds a lot of player interaction. The last thing, and probably the most significant addition, is the module of the Doomsday clock. This thing is really interesting because it does a number of things. First of which is it adds an additional way for the game to end. If the Doomsday clock ever gets around to 12, that's also going to end the game before the normal ending of the game. But the way this works is on your turn, this is another space that you can go to as though it were on the main board. When you place your worker here, you're able to do a few things. The first thing you do is you progress the Doomsday clock 1 step forward. The next thing you do is you're going to pay the quantity, and it ranges from money all the way up to money and taking pollution around the clock for the spot that you just left. Then you're going to take some of these cards. They have these Cold War cards on the Doomsday Clock board. When you take these, you're going to take 3 of them. You're going to end up keeping 2 and putting the bottom one on the deck. When you look at these cards, they're going to have a few different values on them for 3 different categories. This is kind of effectively like set collection for these different categories. When you take 2, you're going to place 1 face up and 1 face down in front of you, so there's a little bit of hidden information, but everyone else is going to know that you have a value 2 in this instance and 1 in these 2 categories. So there's a little vying for control here, because at the end of the game, the Doomsday Clock is going to score for those 3 categories for whoever has the majority in those categories.
Also, each one of those cards at the end of the game is natively worth 1 victory point. So just collecting them, you're also collecting victory points themselves.
Right, and finally, the biggest thing probably with the Doomsday Clock is it allows you to fire off all of the cards that you've collected, regardless of their color. So if you've built a really good engine next to your player board and you want to utilize it without necessarily going to the main board, you can go to the Doomsday Clock, progress it, and fire off all of your cards, as long as you have space on them.
Yeah, and the final thing that's going to be interjected in the game is a new solo mode, and that solo mode has its own deck of cards as well.
Yeah, the solo mode is actually not solo anymore, so to speak. In the original game, you were literally just playing your turns and seeing how well you scored at the end. In the new one, they have this Clash of Nation decks. There's an early deck and a late deck. You're going to flip these cards over for the other player effectively, and these cards have a ton of different information on them that's going to have you doing a number of different things. You're going to be taking pollution off of the track, progressing the game that way. You're going to be generating with this character when they don't have any workers left, because these cards also are going to put workers out on the board and block spots. Most importantly is there's a point value on all of these cards. When the game is all said and done and someone triggers the end, and in this case you can trigger the end or the autonomous player can trigger the end, you're going to add up all of these values, compare your score against their score, and see if you won.
So guys, that is the brand new Cold War expansion for the Manhattan Project Energy Empire. There are 6 new modules.
Yeah.
And 1 new really robust solo game. If you guys have any questions about it, make them in the comments below. Make sure you guys go to the Kickstarter page to see all the final components, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.